Hi, and welcome to AXSchat. Today, we're delighted to have Aurélien Levy join us from Temesis. Aurélien is the CEO, and I've known him for a couple of years now. We've been chatting on and off for that time, both on Twitter, Skype, and in person. Yes, he's one of these people that I've actually met in real life. So delighted to have you with us today, Aurélien. Really pleased to talk about what you're doing for accessibility in France. I know it's slightly different from what we're doing, and it's nice to have a non-Anglophile view of the world for once. So can you tell us a little bit about how you got started and what it was that got you into accessibility in the first place?
First, thank for inviting me. So I began working on accessibility in 2004. I was a web designer, and my company worked on the website for an accessibility motor disability association. So they asked us to create an accessibility website. So I will look at WCAG, and then that's where I become more and more interested in the subject. So after that, I go deeper and learn WCAG by my own and start caring about making website accessible. And then in 2006, I think, the French government want to create their first national guidelines about accessibility. So I contact Elise Loing from Temesis, and we decide to respond together. And after that, in 2008, I joined Temesis as a consultant.
Okay, and in France, the guidelines are it's very similar to WCAG, but they're called RGAA. And yes. I think you're on your third version now. Is that correct?
Yeah. And these guidelines are based on WCAG, but it's basically a testing methodology. So we have multiple tests to check each checkpoints of WCAG. And as WCAG are, as you can make some interpretation of the WCAG, some decisions have been made. So maybe the way we implement WCAG or the way the guideline asks for to conform to WCAG may differ from some other country.
Okay, that's kind of interesting, because WCAG has its own success criteria, also has techniques, right? So is RGAA asking people to implement techniques in a certain way that can then be tested? Is that how you meet the criteria in RGAA? And I think it's gold, silver, bronze, isn't it?
No,
or has it changed?
Yeah, because at the beginning we have the RGAA, and we also have a well-known association, Brinet, who developed his own methodology, which is AXSweb. And AXSweb is based on bronze, silver, and gold. But no, we only have the RGAA because this is the same. They use the same version as the RGAA, and the RGAA are asking to follow the AA level of WCAG. But coming back to your question of testing and techniques, the test itself are based on the technique, but the issue is that the techniques are not normative. So the French government decided to limit the techniques you can use to ensure that when they want to check that a website is compliant, everybody will do the same way. I mean, I think it's one of the main differences we have with the US or UK, because as far as I know, each consultant can do his own interpretation of the techniques and WCAG. So it's good to have this kind of harmonized test, because a lot of tester can do the test the same way, even if there is still some small glitch, because interpretation is everywhere in WCAG. So when you need to decide if something is meaningful or not, you still can have some part of interpretation.
Sure. I know Deborah's got a question.
Yes, welcome to AXSchat. We're really excited to have you on. I have a question about the question, your answer. So I know that, speaking from the U.S. perspective, that we did leave some, some leeway in the what we would consider being accessible. Regardless of whether we're looking at the U.S. laws or whether we're looking at it from the perspective of W3C. But one reason why we did that was because we were afraid that if we made it too specific, and this is how you test a website and it looks like this, even though it would be easier to know whether or not we were there, we were afraid that it would actually get in the way of innovation in the future. And so I would be curious. I understand the need for rigorous testing, but I always worry that it is going to cause consequences to innovation and in the future. So I was just wondering if you wouldn't mind talking about it from that perspective.
Yeah. So as Neil said, we are on the version 3. So the document needs to be updated regularly, because otherwise the techniques are going on, the HTML is going on, but we need to keep up with the update, to keep up to date. But anyway, we will in the testing methodology and in the conformance methodology, we have the ability to make adjustments. So if, for example, you are implementing a new technology that are not covered for the moment by the RGAA, you can fall back to WCAG or to the techniques, and you also can say, okay, for this kind of technical issue, I can test with I can do some user testing, for example.
So would you, I don't know if this is a fair statement to make, but I know that the British standards are maybe an example of that. And I actually think that the British standards are quite good. The problem for the United States is, just for example, if I'm only looking at it from a US lens, is that our laws finally say WCAG 2.0, and anytime we go to tweak anything in the United States, it takes us about 15 years to do it. So y'all move a little bit faster in France than we do in the United States. But so do you think, would it be fair for me to try in some ways to compare what you're doing in France with maybe some of the efforts that are being made with the British standards, or is that just too different from each other, so not a fair comparison?
I think there is a work in many countries going to have an harmonized methodology for the European Union. In the past, we have one. The project was stopped, but maybe with the new European directive, this is something that will come back again, because we have this problem. For example, if we want, we still have the question if the UK will leave the Europe or not, but we are still in it. For example, if some UK company want to respond to a tender in France, yes, for the moment we have the issue that if they want to comply, they will need to know the RGAA. So it's a bit, I think it's a bit complicated in terms of market and competition between the different countries to have this kind of different testing methodology. But at least I think we can agree we can agree on some of the points, because everybody's the base is the same, so for everyone. So at least on some points we can achieve some agreements. At first, maybe in Europe, and I hope maybe later in the world. But I know that also that there is some project going on the W3C itself about testing. First about automatic testing, and now I think the project is moving more on the human and expert testing.
Well, and so I would say that I thought it was a very good point. I mean, I like the way you answered the question. One criticism that I've seen with accessibility all over the world, but specifically in the United States, because of the litigation and the that we have happening over web accessibility, is that it is really hard to do consistent testing and to know whether or not you're there, and it really is very much in the eye of the beholder. And so some of it comes down to, how our lawyers are interpreting it, and how our, judges and our people with disabilities interpreting it one way. So it's just all over the place. Are these testing, is it only looking at websites, or are you looking at other parts of internet communications and technology? And then I'm going to pass the floor over to Antonio.
Okay. Since the version we currently have officially just cover websites, but we have an optional document about mobile. And since October of last year, the law have changed in France. So now everything is covered: application, native application, software. Even if we don't have even some subjects for the moment we don't have any clue on how to do it. For example, on connected device, even on the street, if you have a bus stop that is connected, or I don't know, your fridge, for example. In theory, in France, you have to make it compliant, but for the moment, we don't know how. And
yeah, it's still evolving. Antonio?
Yes, I've been looking to some European reports focus on European readiness in terms of digital, especially there's quite a good strong focus on government digital services, where they measure how every country is ready in the way they deliver digital services for citizens. But if you go to those lists from you don't really see accessibility in there. And then you look at the way how the countries are ranking, and you see some countries way at the top of the list, at least above the average of the EU, and you realize how a country that is a little bit above of the EU that completely, but is a country that completely ignores accessibility. So accessibility is not being considered in order to measure digital readiness in terms of digital services, at least from the start. Can you tell us how this is being your perspective on this, and considering that there's accessibility roadmap for the EU, and there's a very interesting debate happening this week about priorities in the European Union, how do you think we are at this stage in terms of maturity and awareness about the importance of accessibility within the EU?
I think it's very diverse, because for the moment, some countries already have some legislation on accessibility, France, UK, Germany, Italy, but some of the European countries don't have any regulation on that. So for them, it will be a discover, I think, because they know that there is some regulation on some other country, but it will be a new start for them to implement accessibility. So as the guidelines itself, the directive itself say only that you have to conform to WCAG, maybe they will have the need to find a way to implement the WCAG in their own country, because I think even if each country have a different government, you always have some parts that can be harmonized and some parts that are local. So that's why the directive need to be implemented in each country. You need to have some specific rules and maybe some anyway, you will need to have an actor that will push to implement, because yes, there is already country where there is a legislation, but anyway, even with the legislation, we are still struggling to be successful in the implementation of accessibility, because, for example, in France, it's in the law since 2005, and I mean, like maybe like 10% of the website for now are compliant. So I think the question is not, the main question is not how they will do it, but how they will manage to achieve results. Because having a directive that is purely theoretical is useless. We have user behind the directive, so we need to ensure that the user will have access to services all over Europe. So we need to. I think the user need to be more visible and to participate more and make them right. To empower their rights. I mean, in the US, you have some issue because of the legislation, but at least the users are complaining, and there is many. In Europe, I don't see that much. I know that in Spain there is some court case, but in France, for example, for the moment, the user don't complain very much. So people are not. Even if there is a law, people are not really people are still questioning the law and say, okay, I can manage to not do that because nobody complains, so I will wait that somebody complains.
So interestingly, we interviewed Malin Rigg from the Norwegian authority, and they're taking a much more proactive approach, because I think a lot of the time people don't know their rights, and even if they do know their rights, it's difficult for them to know where they complain to. So I think that obviously people are experiencing inaccessibility, but how do you move that forwards if people are not actively engaging with the people that they need to? So do you foresee the day where there will be some kind of regulatory authority within France, or maybe even a European-wide one?
I think that the directive is asking from regular update of implementation of the directive, but I think it will not be enough, because this kind of data I think maybe will be achieved with some automatic testing or really small sample evaluation. Like they will ask to test like 10 or maybe 100 websites, and we have 1,000 and maybe 100 of different websites. So I think the point is, as a Norwegian government do, the question is how the government will push to enforce accessibility. In France, the new law have a fine, a very small fine, but you have to pay 5,000 euro per website or app that are not conforming. It's not exactly that if you read really well the law, because the law asks to tell in the home page if you are conforming or not, and the fine is about that, not about the accessibility itself. So even if you write down on your website you are not conforming, you will not have the fine, but at least there is a fine. And I think the question is about how you manage the stick and the bonus, or I don't know the term, the good things and the bad things that you can offer to people that that do accessibility. For now, accessibility is mainly seen as a restriction of what you can do, and we need to switch that to something positive. And to do that, it must be also something that where people can invest and without saying, okay, I will lose my money if I invest in that. So, for example, in France, we have some sort of tax credits, and maybe we will achieve to have something like, if you invest in accessibility, it will be considered as something that where you can have a tax refund or something like that. Because for the moment, it's quite a bit innovative to do that because nobody do it. So, well, not nobody, but not many body are doing that.
Yeah, I think incentives are really important. We do need to incentivize people as well as penalize them. Antonio, did you have another question?
No, I just said that my feeling is sometimes in Europe people end up not complaining because they still have people may complain within their organizations, but they are not as vocal publicly, and they are not particularly good engaging with the press and with the media, and they still, you know, if it is an organization for the blind in Portugal or in Ireland, they talk within their own community. They don't engage with other groups. And then while in US you are able to see more collaboration between individuals and organizations, and that's why they end up getting more attention than the current situation happen in Europe. And in fact, many of US organizations, they're usually more friendly using digital technology, so that somehow gives them more of a voice than their counterparts in Europe.
Okay. One of the things I've also noticed is that it's very Anglo-centric in terms of the contributors to WCAG as well. So the W3C, there's a lot of white Anglo-Saxon voices on the calls. So how do you think that we could encourage more international non-English speaking input into web standards?
That's a good question and a difficult one, I think, because first, all the work done on WCAG are done in English. So at least you will need to have some people that are not native English speaker, but understand and can write some English good enough to participate. This is the first point. The second point is that in accessibility world, for the moment, it's still a small business. So many of the participants work on small companies. So having time to work on WCAG and participate is a big investment for the small company. I know that some experts in WCAG are actually in small company, but I don't know how they manage to do that. For myself, for example, I would like to participate more in WCAG, but I don't have the time, and my company don't have the money to let me spend more time on participating on WCAG. I think one of the answers maybe will be with the implementation of the European directive, government will have a duty, I think, to report at least to the European Commission, but maybe to participate also more in WCAG. And for example, my hope is that the view that we have taken on some points of WCAG in the RGAA my wish is that we will push that to WCAG to say, okay, we interpret this like that. Do you think this is a good way to interpret this question or not? Or do you think we need to step back and remove this from our methodology?
Yes, it's a very valid point, and I think that we all struggle to find the time to contribute. Well, I work for a very large company, but equally, I struggle to find the time to attend all of the meetings and be part of it, and it's a difficult balancing act. So I can understand how it's difficult for small companies as well, because you've got to bring in revenue directly. Deborah, I know you've got a comment.
Thank you, Neil. And of course, we always want to make sure that the audience is included. So I know that a lot of the people that are included in these accessibility conversations are individuals with disabilities, but I think we need to continue to make sure that people with disabilities have a very visible role to play in all of these things, and no matter what the countries are doing. So I think, you know, there's been a lot of very positive steps in that direction, but I think we need to continue to make sure that that happens as well. So back over to you, Neil.
Take myself off mute, it would help. So the other thing that I know that you do is, you know, OBQuest is a quality methodology. You also look at other elements that are complementary to accessibility. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because I mean, obviously, being interested in cognitive accessibility, the usability and sort of quality of experience is as important for me, or well, personally more important for me as a user than whether or not it works with a screen reader. In my day job as a professional, obviously I have to make sure stuff is technically accessible as well, but usability is incredibly important for people with cognitive issues.
OBQuest basically start from the idea that well, I don't know if you have seen this conference, but I think see someone from TPG saying that accessibility is not putting lipstick on a pig. But yeah, it's not lipstick on a pig, but it's not accessibility. It's quality. People do not want to have accessible websites that are bad. They want good websites that are accessible. So, for example, if your website is perfectly accessible, but for some reason your SEO is really bad and nobody can find you in Google, it will be useless, even if your website is accessible. So it's also a question of how you manage your investment. You need to be accessible, but you need also to have security. You need also to have usability. You need to have all other sort of stuff to manage to have a good website. So at some point you need to decide what you can do and what you can do. The tricky question is that accessibility, for the moment, at least in WCAG, is not really based on what the user can do or can't do. You have the WCAG level, but it's not really like some of the stuff are on level A, or some of them are on level AA, but it's not uniquely based on the user needs. And managing, for example, to do audio description is something that at least like 99% of our customers they never do that because they can't. Just they can't, because not only because they don't want to do it, but because, for example, the process to have a video on the website for the moment do not include time and money to integrate audio description. So it's not only a question about what people want to do, but also a question of what they can do. And we can ask for people to every time spending more. So the question is not how to add accessibility to an existing process, but how you manage to change your process to do less, but with better quality. And this is hard because for the moment, many of the customers want to have a Facebook, Twitter, and everything, every new stuff that is outside, they want to use that, and they want every time they want to have new things on their website to look trendy or something like that. But at some point, you need to think about that and think, oh, do my user really need that I have I don't know which social network? For example, the French government has an Instagram account. I'm not really sure that that's something really useful for people. Maybe it's useful in terms of communication, but do they manage to know how much they spend and how much they win in terms of communication? It's a balance they need to find. And I'm pretty sure that there is a lot of money that is already, for the moment, spent on useless things for the user. And they can change that and spend it more wisely in accessibility, in security, and stuff like that. And usability, for sure.
Yeah, great. So I think you mentioned a really important point, which is that we don't want accessibility to be burdensome. Obviously, there's a requirement to do it, and we want to make sure that everyone has the maximum amount of access to goods and products and services. So how do you think that new technology that is coming or just over the horizon will help in terms of delivering the things that are considered by many small businesses to be too expensive right now? What are the things that are exciting you about being enabling small companies to do more with less money and more accessibility?
There is some really interesting work in terms of artificial intelligence. I think we are still far from the results, but at least for in certain situation, it can be useful. For example, we have a discussion on the French accessibility mail list I'm in, and someone is asking, is managing data, table data, and is wondering, oh, can I manage to have a caption on the table? And because he knows that his user will never enter the correct information, so I've looked at some possibility, and I've seen that there is a company in the US that is creating text based on artificial intelligence. So you give them your pure data, it will produce a text like for newspaper. It has been used in, I think, Financial Times or something like that, because it's just interpretation of the text with no feeling and nothing, just translating the data in understandable text. So, for example, this is something that can be achieved. For the moment, it will still be costly, but when it will be more mass market product, I think we can achieve something that is cheap with a small cost with an API or something like that. And also for now, I think it will work well in English, but maybe not in some other languages. But we will be there at some point. And every day we have new announcement of IBM or Google saying that they have achieved something new with their new bots and things like that. So I'm pretty confident that maybe in 5 years, 10 years, we will have some really interesting product and that that will really help people to achieve conforming to accessibility, but also offering new services to the users. I think all of you have seen the video of Microsoft with their glasses and things like that. It's pretty amazing.
Deborah, you were nodding, but are you on mute?
I was on mute, but I agree. I think, you know, we're seeing such innovation coming from all over the world, and corporations like Microsoft and Apple and Google and others. And with the help of all of us, you know, I think that there's a lot of innovation that we're going to see. A lot of disruption needs to happen in our industry. So it is exciting. You know, I think you had a final question, so I'll turn it back over to you.
Oh, right. It was based upon the sort of stuff you just talked about, and very interested in all of the AI stuff. Definitely think that it's got potential. And I'm just interested to know what it is that you're playing with right now. So yeah, we talked about the sort of slightly further term. Is there one bit of technology or one bit of assistive tech that you're playing with right now that we should be looking at?
What I'm looking at recently, I think Google have produced a specification about managing the accessibility tree directly with JavaScript. That is something that will be really, really interesting, but also will be very tricky for the people testing accessibility, because they will have an accessibility tree that will be different from the DOM tree. So it will be hard to test. They will need to test directly in the accessibility OS API, or don't remember the English term for that. So it will be, many people will think that accessibility is becoming more and more complex. That's sadly true, but that's the cost to pay to facilitate accessibility implementation for developers, for example. So we need to find the good balance between the two, because accessibility needs to be easy to implement for a developer, but it's also need to be not too costly to test, and to make sure that people have access to everything.
Yeah, yeah, we want to make sure we validate it correctly. Well, with you, we really look forward to you joining us tomorrow night on Twitter. Thank you very much, Aurélien Levy.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.